Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to do a deep dive into frame rates and why are they so important. Whether you're shooting on an iPhone or a high-end cinema camera, frame rates are quite crucial for the quality of your project. And by the end of this video I want you to exactly know when and where to choose the right frame rate for your next shoot. So let's get started. Frame rate measured in frames per second determines how many images your camera captures every second. Imagine it like a flipbook. Every page is its own frame, and by flipping through them quickly you create the illusion of movement. Common frame rates include 24, 30, 60, and each frame rate has its own visual style and impact on your project. Most movies, for example, are shot in 24 frames per second, which gives them this classic, nostalgic, cinematic feeling. But why does this matter? It's all about how we perceive motion. With different frame rates, we achieve a different kind of smoothness or motion clarity. Now we need to take a look at a world map, because frame rate is not only an artistic choice, but also a geographical thing. Worldwide, we have two main video standards, NTSC and PAL. NTSC is prevalent in North America and uses 30 and 60 frames per second, while PAL is prevalent in Europe and parts of Asia and uses 25 and 50 frames per second. These standards are tied to the local power frequencies, 60 Hz in NTSC and 50 Hz in PAL. Now, if you shoot with a frame rate that doesn't sync up with the local grid, you might encounter flicker. It's especially present when you shoot with fluorescent or LED lights. This flicker happens because your camera captures light at different phases of its power cycle, causing interference patterns. This is caused by the mismatch of the frame rate and the power cycle of different artificial lights. If your frame rate doesn't match, then you will see the light at different brightness levels, resulting in visible flicker in your images. So remember to sync up your frame rate to the 25 frames per second in PAL, Europe, or to 30 frames per second NTSC in North America. Setting the right frame rate is crucial, whether you're shooting on smartphone or highly professional cameras. On smartphones, it's kind of straightforward. You just have this button where you can cycle through your frame rates. You can do it in the settings as well, but it's quite easy to understand, and when you have all the rules in mind, you can just always set the right frame rate. On higher end cameras like this Sony FX3 or a Burano or Red or whatever, you will see variations of this. 23.976 or 29.97 or 59.94 frames per second. And these slight deviations are artifacts from analog broadcasting technology. We will forget about these numbers because they don't change how your picture will look. What you need to keep in mind is to stay consistent in the frame rate over different cameras you will use on a shoot, and even the sound. Consistent frame rates make your editing workflow much easier. And what also makes your editing workflow much easier is timecode. The timecode also needs to be synced up to the frame rate. And you can do that, for example, with a device like the time bar from Tentacle. It will sync up in your app with all your other Tentacle devices. Here you see the frame rate. And when I tap on it, I have all the different frame rates available I was talking about. And it's very crucial to sync this to all your other devices, because otherwise the timecode won't work. So for me, I will choose 25 frames per second. Let me just sync it quickly. Boom. There we have the timecode. With that feature, I can hand this out to assistant director or to the sound guy or whoever likes to see what timecode we're on, because then they can write down which take is the best one and have the precise timecode. As well as syncing up drones, I think that's quite cool, because when I show this to my drone, I can sync the drone to all my cameras because it's linked up in this Tentacle ecosystem and have tentacles on all my cameras like the Burano or my FX3. And as well as the sound. So this comes in very handy. Full disclosure, Tentacle sent this to me and I've had this unit for a while now and I think I quite like it. It gets useful when something else doesn't work. It's always your last resort to have the timecode visually in place. There's one case where this device won't work anymore, and I'm talking about high frame rates like 60, 120 or even 240 frames per second. When you shoot these kind of frame rates and play them back at 30 frames per second, you create the slow motion effect. And this comes in very handy when you want to emphasize detail in a scene or shoot action or sports. However, high frame rates require you to have more storage space because you're just capturing more images per second, as well as more light. And why that is, we need to understand another concept of filmmaking: the relationship between shutter speed and frame rate. The frame rate determines how many images your camera captures every second, and the shutter speed determines how long each one of these frames gets exposed to light. This interplay is critical to achieve the desired look and feel of your footage. Let's use the 180-degree rule. This rule suggests that you set your shutter speed to double your frame rate. So if your camera is set to 25 frames, it would be 1/50th of a second. This creates a natural motion blur and gives you the classic cinematic style image. However, when you increase your frame rate to 60 or 120 frames per second for slow motion, you need to increase your shutter speed proportionally. That means with 60 frames per second, you need to increase your shutter speed to 120th of a second. This means that every frame you shoot is exposed for light shorter, which is why slow motion generally requires you to have more light to maintain a proper exposure. A fast shutter speed with a high frame rate will reduce motion blur and result in a more crisp and clear image. It will also reduce the amount of light entering your camera. Conversely, a slower shutter speed with the same frame rate will introduce more motion blur and as well as letting more light into your camera. But what is motion blur? Motion blur you can see in my hand right now. When I wiggle it around, it gets all muddy. And that's because the camera is capturing 25 frames per second with a shutter speed of 1/50th, so 180 degrees. And when I increase my shutter speed or the frame rate or both, then I will have less motion blur in the picture, because capturing more frames means more images when my hand gets from here to here. And that results in a more crispy and clearer image. But we actually want this style of motion blur because we associate it with the cinematic look. And when you increase your frame rate, you get much more of a video look, which can be desired in sports, for example, where I just want a crisp and clear image to see what is happening. On the other hand, in movies, I want to direct the viewer's eye, and I think more motion blur equals more immersive shots that you can create. But motion blur isn't just important for your real-life video. It's also a crucial tool to create fluid and immersive text animations that feel integrated to your video. Maybe you've noticed the text around the video. This is from a new template package from Matt Voyce, exclusively available on MotionArray. Matt Voyce is an animator known for his distinctive style of this kinetic typography. This template is amazing for you if you want to add dynamic text animations to your next video or project and enhance the look and feel of it. What's also amazing is that Matt Voyce is giving his templates out in a customizable way for the first time, so you can fine-tweak it to your personal needs. Remember, whenever you're using motion blur, it's not only important for your real-life footage, but also for text animations like this to keep them in a cohesive look with your whole project. With that, just check out the templates with the link from MotionArray in the description below, and let's get back into how you choose the perfect frame rate for your next video project. In film, frame rate is more than just a technical setting. It's a storytelling tool. With the right frame rate, you can enhance the look and feel of your project. Whether you're capturing fluid and realistic movement in 30 frames, or you try to achieve the cinematic look with 24 frames per second, it all comes down to what kind of image you want to produce. Just experiment with different frame rates. I'm shooting in 25 frames per second, all the stuff I do, because I like the look of it most. I shoot mostly documentary films and corporate stuff, so I want a cinematic look. But in some cases on corporate stuff, I just want a very crisp and clean look, and then Even I might go up to a higher frame rate. If you consider this video helpful, maybe you can leave me a like or even subscribe to my channel. This helps me grow and make more videos of this kind. And remember, whether you're shooting on a smartphone or high-end cinema cameras, the principle of great filmmaking always stays the same. If you want to see the greatest cameras on the market right now compete to each other, check this video out. And with that, it just leaves me to say a big thank you and see you next time.